My name is Patrick Hanratty, and I had attended UCI for a matter of years. What was it like in San Diego? It's a little bit hard to describe because the things that I did when I was a young boy and the things that my parents did were a little bit different. I found that the Old Globe, because of my parents, was something that I was exposed to, and I couldn't hardly escape from it. Now, I did get very interested in what was involved in what they were doing, but it wasn't until many years later that I actually contributed or got involved in it myself. I was 18 when I did some very trivial work as far as being part of it. Most of my interests, however, were in music. And so where I should have been working in the Old Globe work, I was actually singing with Starlight Opera. And they were both in Balboa Park, so my folks never knew that I was actually doing that until they saw me on stage one time. My folks were divorced when I was 5 years old, and my mother used to sing to me an awful lot. I used to sing when I was 7, 8 years old. I would sing outside of bars and around 10 o'clock at night, and I'd wait outside for the drunks to come out, and I'd put this horrible look, oh sir, please help me. And I would do that in order to get money, and as soon as I got enough money, I would take and go off to a bookstore and buy books. My musical part actually became very solid. I did, however, break away from it when the Korean War started, and I went in and I entered into the Air Force. That kind of eliminated me getting involved in any more music. When I got out of the Air Force, and even while I was in it, to a certain extent, I got interested in how I could take information that I was working with and put it in a cohesive manner so that I can do things with it. And when I got out of the service, I was working I moved from San Diego to General Electric, and they asked me to do some work that I'd never done before. The first thing was to make the characters that exist on your checks. And they had created a thing called an MICR, Magnetic Ink Character Reader, and that was created for one of the big companies that General Electric serviced. And so they said, give us a character set. I said, okay. It took me about 6 or 7 months to actually come up with what's now on the checks, and they were accepted as being the things that we have today. And that's how I got started in really the structure of data and how it was controlled and what we did with it. I didn't have anybody. I did not go to school for it. I did get a master's in mathematics, all except the term paper I was supposed to put out, and I didn't see any value to it. So then I went on to another class. I knew that at some point in time, I really didn't know when, but there were going to come to a time when the design and manufacture of things were going to require a different base than the two-dimensional base that existed at that time. So I finally found a school in not too far from here, about 12, 15 miles from here, that actually had a master's in the field of basically handling data. It was a really great chance for me to go in and work, and I did, and I got a master's there. That got me into, I think, eventually UCI. At General Electric, I was at General Electric for about 5 years, actually 4 years, and it was until I did the character set, and then after that I created a software package that drove the things for machining. And because of that, General Electric said that they wanted me to automate a steel mill. Well, me automating a steel mill is like, you know, my dog running the biggest race in the world or something. But I went back to Pittsburgh and brought my family and did actually go in and figure out how to automate a steel mill. It took me a year, and then I had 12 people working for me. And at the end of the year, we actually had automated the complete mill. Now, that type of data is a lot different than the two-dimensional things we usually saw in design information. To go in and to create what the 3D factors were in automating a mill. And that's where I really got involved in it, to the point where it wasn't too far away from me starting my own company, because I don't like to have to work for other people who are putting me in a direction that I really can't produce what I want to produce. After General Electric, I went on my own. I opened my own company and did my own stuff. And actually, I reached the point where the industry was coming to me for the three-dimensional designs. I had over 100 companies, the major companies, were coming to me for the 3D design work. And then I got involved in work that is classified. I can say some of it was nuclear, and I did get involved in that. And then I got involved in the space shuttle. And in the space shuttle, there's one thing that caused problems when it was first created, and that's the tiles that were on the very top of it. And when that entered space, coming into land, or not land, but coming into the Earth again, it was supposed to melt. And what happened is that all of these things fell off instead of melting. And consequently, the company that was doing the space shuttle couldn't figure out how to solve it. I was here in town at that time, not too far from here, and probably 5 miles from here at the most. And they sent over 3 guys to my office and said, we got to do it. Well, it took us about 6 or 7 days. It wasn't too much. And we went in and got it done, got that whole thing so that they never had a problem after that. And because of that, that opened up the door to other problems that existed, not in the space shuttle, but in things that had to do with. Actually, what happened is that I got involved in the data that is used for nuclear work. And it was extremely difficult when they asked me to, after I'd done some of the other work, they asked me if I could go over and see the problem, because they were having a lot of fatalities. 2 pieces of metal coming together and exploding. And so they asked if I would at least try to find an answer for it. They gave me a room to work in and my own computers and everything that existed like that. And I went in and scratched my head for a while, looked at all the things they had, and then I went home and came back here. This was over in San Antonio, Texas. And then I thought, okay, I'm going to go back over, and walked in my room. It was really funny because that room, by the time I had started, was full of data that no one else could see. And the second time I went back to that facility, I found an armed guard on each side of the doors to get into the room. And it turned out I had the only access to it. But I did go in and I found out what was happening in the manufacturing process that would cause explosions. And it wasn't very hard to actually go in and find out what the real reasons were. So I put it in, activated it, and left. And I went back a month later just to see what was happening. Everything was fine. Another month I went back and I was going to go into the room to see if I could test, see if it was still working. And they wouldn't let me in because I no longer had a high enough clearance to go into that room. And I said, well, I created that. And they said, too bad. We don't need you anymore because we haven't had a problem now in over 3 months. So I thought I was pretty happy about that. You know, I'm very happy to get out of there. I was right down the road here. I had actually moved not too far from the school, And when I decided that the things that I had done, while they were important, were not anything that was it was not really to the depth of being true knowledge. There wasn't anything that I had ever done that wasn't a physical thing in some way that could have been done by anybody who were, guided a little bit. And I really felt bad that I didn't know what the real aspects were to all of the things I've been doing. And so I came over and I met a gentleman, Dr. Peter Freeman. And at that time, I was pretty well known in most of the world because I supplied what you call CAD and CAM to every country that you could imagine. It was the first one to be out there. And so I looked at it, and when I walked in to see Peter Freeman, Dr. Freeman, he looked at me and he said, "I know you, Patrick." He says, "I have heard all the wonderful things you've done. You've taken pieces of metal and bent them, and you've done this and that." He says, "And you've never done anything that wasn't just stuff." And I said, "Well, that's true, and that's what I'm trying to get away from." He said, "What you really need to do is find out what the heart of all these things are. What is the actual thing that you want to learn? And it isn't how to cut metal and how to move things around and how to put information on a board. You have to go in and find out what the really base of all this is." And I said, "That's correct." And he says, "If you guarantee me that while you're here, you never once talk about or mention or do anything to do with all the things you've done in the past, if you do that, then I will accept you. And if you don't do that, if I find you're talking to people about what you had done for years, I have nothing to do with you." And I agreed. It took me over 2 years to finally understand what it was that Peter was talking about. And at that time, 2 more doctors came in and joined him. And the 3 of them used to work me over as far as what I was trying to do and what it was that I actually accomplished. So anytime I give a talk somewhere, I have that list of those 3 people because without them, I never could have gone and jump over the thing I was trying to do and land in what really was important and not just physical. I cannot say I was doing this, that, or the other thing. And the only people, when I finally came at the end of my thing, when I was getting my doctorate, and the only people who I could sit and communicate with were those 3 people. We had people from every one of the universities, to hear me before they actually signed me off. And I did the stuff that's supposed to be done, but all the other people left, and those 3 people stayed there and said, "Okay, let's really talk about what's been going on." And that's what happened. It was, and then they said, "Okay, you're done." And it was very interesting for me to find out that the things that I had learned weren't really things that I had learned during that time. It was something that happened inside of me. I can't describe it. All I can tell you is that I have been able to do things that I never dreamt I could do. I was here on campus, but at that time, I was also in the middle of running a company that was all over the world, and so I didn't consider myself a student per se. I was, of course, but it didn't enter my head that I was a student. I'd been students in so many other lower schools. This was just something different, something that was more important to me. How did I actually run a company and get a PhD? I look at a PhD as being some words. It's a very important set of words, and it's used to describe a certain inhalation of information. That's what a PhD means to me anyway. And consequently, I didn't have any separate steps that said, okay, this is what really gets me a PhD. In my company, because I got to the point where I put my software to about 50 or 60 companies out there where they could actually sell it. I had competitors, and my competitors never competed. And I finally got to the point where I opened up offices in several places around the world, and it was a good thing and a bad thing in that at that time we did not have a good relationship with a company in Europe that decided that they wanted to have my data. And so I had a colonel of a military person from that company had as a goal taking me so that they could have the data. They tried to kidnap me. And fortunately, the wall came down and they finally gave up on it. But that was a very difficult time because of the information that I couldn't give them. But the idea of running a company for me was find the best people I can. I went a year before I hired a gentleman that graduated from here. And he came in, and he was the first person I had actually work for me. And then pretty soon I had 2 people, then 5, then 10, 50, finally got up to 178 people. And what I did is I picked people that I felt could do what they had to do on their own, that I didn't have to go and look over their shoulder. And that's exactly what happened. I had a really unbelievably high-end group of people. And because I treated them the same way I wanted to be treated, that is, we got the same things at Christmas. You know, I put out bonuses. I had a bonus, which was exactly the same as the bonus of the girl who was sitting on the desk of the company. We all had the same thing. And consequently, I got a really great chunk of people working for me. As time went by, they just, they were ready to retire. And I had people retiring, 10 a month for a while. So anyway, it was 5 years ago that I just closed the door on everything. I guess it's been 6 years ago. I just closed the door. It isn't that I closed the company down. Haven't changed anything though. I still do some work that I would have done if I were, having the company run full tilt. It's a little difficult. I can't really describe it. It has to do with something in case of Boeing. If you take Boeing in the 797, which is going to come out in about 6 or 7 years, they can't do what they want to do yet because there are no computing facilities that allow them to handle the data that they want to. And I had presented this to 2 people at Boeing and said, this is something I can do, but I can't do it if there's not a can to pour stuff into. I can't go and do it. But I have done all the mathematics for it already, and that was almost 2 years ago now. And I set it aside until they gave a call and said, we finally come up to the plate where we can handle terabytes of information simultaneously, and we need that before we can put the stuff out we want to do. So that's the only thing I've tried to do in the last few years. It was a challenge, and now I also take my challenge and go out and prospect. I've become a prospector, a gold prospector, for many, many years. It's the other thing that I do as a hobby, just to go out and, let everything else flow off. And for gold to flow in sometimes. It's a hobby that I have just so I can keep my mind going and still do something physical. I think my relationship at UCI is probably one of the closest things that a person can have. The things that I did at UCI, the things that I got involved in here, it wasn't too long ago that I was here doing something with people, and it was not official. But the people that I find closer to my heart and to my mind are the people that I knew when I was here, and the 3 gentlemen that used to beat me up. mentally. Right now, I do spend time, well, I sing, probably once a week, but I basically go and look at prospecting and physical things. I have one thing that I've been working on, like I say, for 2 years, and I got to the point where I've completed the mathematics. I can't go any further because there's no hardware and there's no software that I can attach to in order to move forward. So I say, okay, when that happens, then I'll go back in and start working a bit. I also do work on other things, and I can't describe it because I can't figure out what I'm doing. When I go to do something and I look at it and say, oh, this would be interesting, and I'll try to do it. And I do it and set it up on a shelf, and then I forget about it. But I don't think I'll ever quit working, per se, when it comes to computing. It's, to me, to say, okay, I'm old, I'm still moving along pretty well, I'm enjoying life, and I think at some point in time the door is going to open and I can find the next step to what it is I want to work on. Oh, I definitely want to see the first folio again. Yes, that is, the first folio is this magic thing for me. When I bought that, I had already looked at all the material that would be there through Lamb's Tale of Shakespeare. I'm still a feeling that the school world should present this to children in grammar school for the Lamb's Tale from Shakespeare. What it is a compression of the actual thing, and it is what I started with at around 7 years old, and I read that one between 7 and 8 years old. And it is an important document that's no longer getting done anywhere. I had 10 copies that I was going to bring over and give to people, but I decided not to carry them along on the trip. It's very, for me, it's important that I try to stay close to young people and also to the university. The university has changed dramatically from the time I left here. And I don't know if that's good or bad. I have no idea. It's just that it's the evolution of the high-end universities in the country. I think in some cases it's good, some cases it's bad. I also spent a lot of time with ASU. It isn't because I only got a bachelor's there, but for some reason they think, oh, well, it doesn't matter. And so they're always saying, because it's right down the road from me, I can go over and say, well, we'd like to do something today or tomorrow, and I can do it. And the access is there. Access here says, drive 112 miles and get on a plane and fly over here, and it takes a lot to get here. Sure. And to get home. I had collected money standing outside of a bar, okay? And I used to go to a place that had a bookstore, but they weren't new books at all. They were all old books. And at one time, I just happened to find this on the shelf, and I opened it, Lamb's Tales from Shakespeare, and I started to read it while I was standing there. I said, this is great. This is really great. I can get all of Shakespeare and get all of the things that are important in there, and I can do this in a couple of days. And I got excited about it. And so I kept that, and I've always had a copy that I kept. I've tried to give other copies away, and I'm hoping at some point in time I can get the schools, especially the grammar schools, the upper grades in the grammar schools, that I would love to see them, have access and to have the kids do this. I don't know if the education world is different or not now. I really don't. When it comes to the grammar schools and high schools and college, I don't know if there's a big difference than when I was young. But I will tell you that when I see people in stores and when I see people who have graduated from high school when they're taking the money that you give them and they're going there and said, oh, it's 5, 4, okay, this is 3, and they spend 30 seconds or 45 seconds trying to add 4 numbers together. And this seems to be something which is getting to be more and more, disastrous. And so I am interested in at least trying to open a door in one category, and that would be Lamb's Tales from Shakespeare. And if I could ever really find a place that was interested in it, I'd do anything I can to go out and get copies of it. Can't really afford it, but I would. It's one of these things that I think are not available to me. The Lamb's Tales from Shakespeare, much before I ever heard of anything over at the Old Globe, I was between 7 and 8 years old. I found this book in this bookstore that I went, and I just kind of glanced at it, and then I got fascinated with it. I stood there and read part of it before I paid my 10 cents or whatever it was, and took it home. I really got fascinated at that point. That was, if my folks had never been in over at the Globe, it wouldn't matter, because I was actually singing about 4 miles away, when I was singing opera. So, and I did have a lot of friends over at the Globe. So it was, for me, it was just a natural thing that I saw because of the exposure of my parents, but primarily because of the people I saw and the things that I had seen before. This beautiful thing. Be amazed how the material of this book, how fine it is, how great it is. I mean, this is a book that doesn't stain easily or anything like that. And I was familiar with it when I was very young. I had seen this somewhere, I don't know where. But it wasn't until when I got to the point where I had my own company and I started to make a lot of money. And one day, a gentleman from Boston came in and said, hey, in LA, there's a copy, the first folio is available. I said, I'll buy it. He said, it's going to be expensive. I said, I didn't care, I wanted it, and I did buy it. And over a period of a year, I was going to put it into a safe, and I said, no, I want people to see it. And I put it on a table in my office, but then I started to worry that people are going to pick it up and they're going to get dirty hands and all this kind of thing, and this was too precious. So I tried to figure out, okay, what would I really do with it that I think it's going to be used the way it should be? And then, there's a fellow over there that runs, I guess he runs part of the information stuff here at the school. But anyway, I went over and I said, would you like a copy? Would you like to have my book? He said, yeah. I said, oh, okay, I'll bring it over. And I just put it in a briefcase and walked it over. And he said, oh my God, what are you doing? I said, well, this is it. And he said, yes, it is. And I was really kind of shocked that it was so rare for anyone to have, because I had one. So it can't be really that rare. Well, I finally did a little studying and I found just how rare this is. And I was so happy because when I came over, I found, when I used to come over here quite a bit when I was actually working down 5 miles from here or so. And it was always out on display, in the library. And that's so neat, that people have a chance to see it. And so, that was really, to me, it was a gift to me that I could supply something like this. It was in a bookstore in LA, yes, that's where it came. The gentleman was from Boston, but there's all he did was handle books. And he found out that there's a big bookstore in Los Angeles. In fact, it was there that I was trying to get the Lamb's Tales from Shakespeare that I could get more of, and I called them a few months ago. But and I said, okay, buy it. And so the fellow who was handling it for me bought it and brought it into my office and said, here it is, and how they knew that I had a big interest in it. And the fellow in Boston knew that anything like this, would water my tongue and get me going. And when I found out that this was available, I just couldn't turn it down. I didn't ask for how much it was or anything else. I will tell you this, though, when I gave it to the university, I had someone from one of the newspapers interview me. And they said, aha, you gave that to the university? I said, yep. And he said, how much is it worth? I said, I don't know what it's worth now. I know I paid $250,000 for it. And, oh yeah, you paid $250,000. And so when he put out the article, he said, and Hanratty had the money from $250,000 that he got, taken off of his thing because that's what he could get by giving that away and getting all the benefit of it. I had no money coming into that year. I didn't have a penny. The way I ran my business, it wasn't something that I could ever take away from taxes at all. And I was so angry at the time, because to me it was a thing of love, and it wasn't me trying to come up with a few $100s or a few $1,000s. It's just ridiculous, Money has one thing in life, and that's what you can do with it and use it properly. But just having it to make money by selling stuff and giving them away is, I can't take that. Here I am years later. I can walk over it, I can still see it, and I know that hundreds and hundreds of people can see it, or thousands can see it now. And to me, that's a gift to me. I feel, it's nice to be able to do things like that. It really is. And tell you, a person who's really great on things like that is my wife. My wife has taken, on occasions, almost every penny that I had so that she could go out and do something for someone who had really, really great needs. And she would go out and she would do something for them, but without anybody in the world knowing. And she's the one who got me in a different mode. At one time, they were creating a new building not too far from here. And and it was a really big, new, wonderful place for operas and things like that. And when there was opening night, there was a pre-night for the people who had contributed to it and what have you. And so I told my wife, you gotta have a gown. You have to have a gown? She says, I don't want a gown. I'll wear a dress. She said, no, you gotta have a gown. So she got a gown. And we walked into the place and she said, this is beautiful. It's really beautiful. Wait, what's this? What's this over here? I said, what do you mean? She said, up at the top here, Dr. Patrick J. Hanratty, wife Sandra, and Scott, and what are these? I said, that's our family. She says, what's it doing here? I said, well, I don't know, I guess. She said, you bought it, didn't you? You bought the space here. I said, I didn't buy the space there. I contributed to this development here. She said, sure. You went out and you gave them money. And because of that money, they put your name up there. And she said, just think about it. Suppose you were a crook and you went out and robbed 1,000 people, but you had all this money, and you gave money to a place like this and had their name put up there, even though they had stolen all that money. Would that be nice? I said, no, that would be nice. And she got me about, she said, like, you're going to give some money over to the university, UCI, for a building? I almost did, but I said, no, I don't think I will. And she said, oh, sure, you go over there and you're going to pay a lot of money out, a few $100,000, and you're going to get your name up there. I said, yeah, probably. She says, you better not. You better not. If you give something away, you give it out. You give it out because you want to in your heart to do it, not because you want to go out and buy your name somewhere. And boy, did that kick me. And it really did. I mean, since then, I've followed her. I didn't realize how strong she felt, about using money. To use money just to go out and, use it for your own name, bad. So after 61 years of married life, this lady continues to really makes me feel inferior in some ways, because she is probably one of the finest human beings, truly, as far as taking care of other people. If she had to get rid of our house and sell it because there were some people who needed the money, she would do it, and she wouldn't care, not a bit. So, Flatland. Now, Flatland is something, again, that I found. Oh, here it is. I love this thing. I just love it. There's something about going in and watching Flatland people communicate, and fall in love with things and all the things that happen. I really got so thrilled with it. And I still have 3 copies at home. I've read this book 20 times. And I probably read it at least once every 2 years now. I mean, I really love this book. It's got something to it that you can't really understand. But at the very end, of course, there's one little time when the 3D step takes place, and I'm fascinated by it. And when I go home, I'll read it again, just because it's up in front of me again. I love this thing. And I try to get as many copies of this as I can. For a while, I had a fellow go out and try to get all these books he could buy. And so I did have a few of them come back to the place here. And I still have 3 of them, and I'm going to keep 1. And those other 2 are going to go somewhere. I don't know where, but I like this much better than any of the other books. Another one of these things that I just found in a bookstore, and I looked at it, and this is strange. And then I looked at it a little further, and again, and then all of a sudden it clicked with me what was in there, and I had a romance of many dimensions. You betcha it is. So anyway, that's how I got it, the first copy. After that, I was trying to get them so I can give them away to people who might appreciate it. I've had people read it, and 9 out of 10, they have no joy from it. There's no joy. Oh, big deal, just straight line stuffs. And that I've never really quite understood. I think that this has been a really wonderful gift as far as the way it's presented. And so I love it. When I was a kid, I was a pauper, all right? When I ran my company, as it grew, I became extremely rich. So much so that my wife, I thought, was going to leave her. I bought her I forget, one of the high-end cars, the 2-door cars, for Christmas as a present. And I had a big bow put on it. And when I went out to look at it, she said, "So what am I going to do with this?" I said, "Honey, this is what everybody in the world drools about." And she says, "Okay, where do I put my groceries? Where do I put the dog?" I said, "Well, not in this." And she said, "So?" And she sold it. I mean, she gave it, she says, "Take it back." She says, "I haven't got any use for this. If it had a use, I would take it, but I'm not going to take something that isn't a use." So, I mean, it was, things like this have just happened by they were not automatic. It was just something that happened. I found it, fell in love with it. And I haven't found many things in that category, really. I have a book, however, that I have looked for 30 years. It's called The Castaways. And I have had everybody in the book world try to find it. 1930, somewhere between 20 and 36, because I had The Castaways in 37. I had a copy of it. And I fell in love with that book. And in moving from Rochester to the coast when I had to give up my books. That was one of the ones I gave up. And I have not been able to find one since. My children, everybody I know, people from this university, have tried to find this book called The Castaways. And there's 100 castaways out there, but not the one where a professor and two boys get struck on an island, and how the professor shows how he taught them how to get fire and how to do this and that and everything else, you know, and how he actually could survive comfortably in a world like that. And I really wanted that book. And someday, maybe the day before I die, I'm going to get the book. The last time I was here, I met a man who was getting his degree, his MD, from here. And I can't remember who he was, but he and I sat together at a table, and he recognized me not as who I was, but what had been done in this school. And the person who taught him, in this case, it was cosmetic surgery on faces and things. And he was so impressed when he found out that I was one of the two people that this particular doctor had ever worked on. I needed to have someone give me a face at one time. And he said that was in a book that the school here has when it comes to cosmetic surgeries, that man is the father of cosmetic surgery. And it's one of these blessings I had again, you know, that had I not had that man, I would have ended up like a couple other people I know, you know. And so this was because, you know, I met somebody right here, we had lunch here, you know, and he recognized me. And that man is someone who obviously got involved with this university. And there were a lot of good things for it. I tend to be, I'm not trying to put anything up, down, or anything else. The changes are because of the change in the flows of people. And I think to a certain extent that's good for the university, because we're finally getting to a point where we don't have this is what we're going to teach, this is what we're going to learn. We now have people that say, okay, I need to do this and this and this and this, and it's spreading out like a flower. And I think that's something that makes this university, to a certain extent, different from a lot of the large ones. Now, I also I don't spend a lot of time with, but I do have probably once every month or so, I do go to ASU and meet the president there, and we talk about some of the things that they're doing, you know, and I give them my attitude of what I feel they're doing and what they should do more of and what they should do less of, you know. But I think this school is one of the, I won't say a keynote thing, it's one of the schools that should be held almost in a reverent form, because it has expanded from this one path type of thing to something that has an impact on people all over the world. It's not just in the US. And you know, that's a very positive thing.